In 2012, he founded an organization called Storyhunter, which has now grown into a network of almost 25,000 powerful, impactful voices that are spreading their messages to not only the world's largest companies, but the world's largest media organizations. He's a good friend of mine, he's a mentor, a fantastic guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Ragir.
What's up, Milwaukee? Like I said, I'm Alex Ragir, co-founder of Storyhunter. When I was 22, I was like, I want to be a journalist, or I want to be a filmmaker, but I don't know if I really want to work that hard. You know, you want to, I want to do that. Yeah, that makes sense. But really, you have to work twice as hard, and you get paid much less. You can go into real estate, you can go into insurance sales, you can be an electrician, and for the most part, you'd have, that's a more sure shot. How many of you guys have that in the back of your mind? I don't know, I'll do this for now, but yeah, there we go. Yeah, I mean, these are the people who are probably the most honest. But I'm sure there's more people. But what happened was I started, as Aaron was saying, I started at a very prestigious publication, the alternative to the alternative newspaper tabloid of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Vital Source. You guys heard of this? Yeah, John Ann, exactly. And I remember one time I was sitting in one of these cafes, and these newspapers are all in the cafe, it used to be in the cafes and bars and stuff. And I was looking over, and there was this guy in a nice sports jacket, and he was reading the Vital Source, and he was watching it, and I was trying to see if he was going to turn the page, because these were big spreads, see if he was going to turn the page to actually read the next page of my article. And he turned the page, and I was like, holy shit, this grown-ass fucking man is reading my story that I just went on and wrote, and he's reading it, and he's finishing it, and I was like, I can do this. I can work 5 times as hard. I can work 10 times as hard. I can do this for the rest of my life. This was me when I left Milwaukee, and I moved to Miami, and I was dreadlocks and really into hip hop and all different. I was I'm the modern day Renaissance man. I'm DJ, breakdancing, graffiti, I studied philosophy. My uncles were yeah, that and the dollar will buy you a cup of coffee. And I transferred kind of all of that energy into backpack journalism. During this time, the Apple just came out, the Mac 4, and people could then edit and produce video with digital cameras and produce a documentary that previously would have costed hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars to produce. Now one person could produce that with just the idea. So I thought this was going to just change the whole world. And when I brought my video to Vital Source, they were like, we don't have video. This is before YouTube. This is they're like, we don't have a place to put video. I'm like, this is a website. Anyone can produce, anyone can upload a video to the website. So we uploaded it, and it showed up 1-inch squared, pixelated. No way you can watch a video like that. And there was no YouTube. There was no other place where we could put this out, get feedback. No one saw these videos. I sent them to 50 media companies. I was looking for a job. Got rejected by every single one of them. Because they're this is the future. This is what we want to do. Everyone knows that. But we're not ready. We don't have the technology to just put it up on our website. There was no YouTube. There was no way to do it. You're 5 years ahead of your time. You're not going to really find much. I went back to Miami and produced a documentary with who became my co-founder now, about during 2004 elections, about the different cultures and all the things that influence national politics, very relevant stuff. There was no Storyhunter, there was no place for us to sell it. Like our biggest buyers, we put it up on Amazon, we sold tens of DVDs, and my mom and his mom were like our top customers. It was amazing. And there was no really place to go, so I went into financial journalism. You know, the reality is storytelling is one thing that you really need to practice, and it doesn't really matter what you're covering, as long as you're picking up the skills to do it and you're working hard and learning how to do it in the highest quality. And I got a job with Bloomberg News in New York City. And it was sort of like, you know, you have to like learn from the best so you can take it wherever you want to take it, you know. So I was working at Bloomberg and I put in my 10,000 hours, like Malcolm Gladwell says, like that if you focus on one thing, to become a master, you really just have to put in 10,000 hours. It's not about being the smartest or the Mozart, or it's really about just sticking with something and putting in the hours to become really, really a master in one particular thing. And from New York, I basically got to get my dream job of becoming a foreign correspondent in Rio de Janeiro. And this is a funny video because in Brazil, they don't have these like integrations with different news outlets where when economic growth numbers or unemployment numbers come out, it doesn't automatically send headlines. They basically put, like we used to do 30 years ago, they put like these 15 journalists in one room and they give you a piece of paper and they do a countdown and then you turn it over and you have to memorize where the important information was and scream it into your cell phone. And this is what they're doing right now. Screaming into your cell phone and then they send the headlines. And traders trade millions and millions of dollars. And that's me. And I was doing it, the first time I did it, it was like 4.6. I turned it over. I was like 5.3, no, stop, don't set the headline. I don't know what happened. I was just so stressed out that I don't know where these numbers came out, but I completely said the wrong number. Luckily, they didn't send the headline because I said, don't send the headline quick enough. But after a while, I recognized and I learned how to deal with that type of stress and learned that you don't have to be that worried, that if you just stay calm, you won't mess up. And I became pretty good at it, and that's why they created this video. The competition was like, it's impossible that he's beating us with this. And they started filming it because they thought I was cheating. But putting in the work, I got to really do the stories that I really got into journalism for. So, you know, because I was turning over the paper and doing that every single day, and being disciplined and being someone that they could trust, they trusted me to do some of the big stories. And one time, a colleague of mine tipped me off to this guy who worked at Merrill Lynch, and as I started investigating, it turned out that this was the biggest white-collar crime investigation in the history of the federal police of Brazil. And it never kind of came out because the big banks basically sent appeals and kind of killed the investigations before they could, people could be charged. And I basically used all of the persistence and basically found people in the government and got like this much papers of leaked documents from the courts and federal police and internal emails from, I met with dozens of former employees that in the end proved that the people who were running the world's biggest banks in New York and Switzerland were complicit to all the illegal activities they were doing in Brazil. And it came out, and I won Best Reporting in Latin America in any media, and Best Investigative Business Story of the Year. And I was like, this is exactly why I got into journalism. And I was like on the high point of a wave. And it's sort of like I looked at my life and I was like, you can just keep riding this wave. Why would you ever get off of this wave? And then I kind of thought, like, I got into journalism because I wanted to change journalism. And my dream was to be a foreign correspondent in Rio de Janeiro, but it also was to be an entrepreneur, changing the way that people kind of trying to prove that you can do things a different way. And that the whole technology is changing, and that we really needed to, the systems in place were not really sufficient for the future. And this picture was doing a report in the biggest favela, biggest slum in Latin America, Rocinha. And this was for Bloomberg TV. And as you can see, there's a huge camera there. We had a band, we had all these people. After we shot this, we had an editing suite. And I had said beforehand, why don't we just hire my friend who can produce this, and he's won all these documentaries. Me and him can just go in and we can do this whole story with just 2 people. And they were like, no, we can't pay them. We have to have only approved vendors. We have to pay them through New York. What contract would we use? We don't know who this person is. And so they basically spent 50 times, 60 times more than they needed to produce something that was less intimate, less relevant for the times that we lived in. And at the same time, my co-founder, who's now my co-founder, was in the Middle East, in Cairo, during the Arab Spring. And he was inside Egypt during the revolution, and he had all these stories that he wanted to produce. He produced like 2 stories for the New York Times or other places, but he only had a few contacts. But he was inside of the revolution and had all these stories and didn't have all the places that would want them. There was no way to contact them and say, hey, I have 15 stories, and you're not even here yet. But he didn't have those contacts. So he had to leave Cairo, and as he was leaving, he saw all these big production crews with 6-person crews, all the Bloombergs of the world spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to send their crew in when he could have got it a week ago faster, cheaper, for 50 times less. And we were like, we have to change this. So we quit our jobs. I left my beautiful apartment 2 blocks from the beach in Ipanema and left my beautiful girlfriend, and we started Storyhunter. And what we did is we built out a network of freelancers all over the world and created a system so they could verify their work and prove their quality, and so they could tell the stories of the world. And then we solved the problems for the Bloombergs of the world, where we streamlined all the contracts. We created their approved onboarding and vendor account setup. And then we handle all the contracts and the payments so that the people at the companies can focus on telling the best stories and the stories that are most relevant to them. And the freelancers don't have to handle all the paperwork and can find people who want the jobs that they want to do, so they can live their passion and they can focus on doing the work that they love, doing the work that they really believe in, and then find companies that want to do that type of work, instead of just trying to send your resume to 50 different media companies like I had to do. And now we're 25,000 members in 192 countries. We're used by the biggest media companies like CNN, Al Jazeera, National Geographic, New York Times, and brands like Starbucks, Zillow, LinkedIn use us for their branded storytelling. Because really in this world, now any company really needs to be producing video and figuring out a way to tell their stories. Some of the things that were kind of most inspirational for me is the emails I get from freelancers. So this guy is like, Nathan Willis, sent an email saying, I moved to Little Rock, Arkansas because of a girl, and I basically thought I'm going to give up my dream of being a documentary filmmaker because, you know, there's no big media companies there. There's no companies that I can work with there. So he's got into wedding photography, and he thought that was his life. And he joined Storyhunter right when it began, and quickly began producing stories for the world's biggest outlets and Academy Award-winning production companies. And he became one of the most prolific people in the United States on our platform. And it's just like, and the things that does to his community, he becomes someone who he's producing, he's living out his passion, but also he's you know, an example for people around in there that they can do it too. Another person was Inara Shayamichi in Sao Paulo. She basically started off on the platform very quickly, right when we started, as the one-woman band type journalism. And then she wanted to expand, and she wanted to start her own business. And this is the same time when we realized that brands also need to tell their story. And so she wanted to move and keep doing her passion projects, but also do branded content and commercial work so she could build a sustainable business. And because she had started so quickly when we started, she was the top-rated person in Sao Paulo. So when one of these global brands, I can't mention the name, wanted someone in Sao Paulo, I said, she's the best person. It's not that she's necessarily the best person in Sao Paulo, a huge metropolis, but she's the best person on our platform. And she's got a lot of good reviews, she's good to work with. Really, this is instead of this brand sending a huge crew and sending all their money to the airplane companies and the hotels and dealing with all the logistics, instead she hired out 29 people in Sao Paulo that also, you know, allowed them to practice their craft and recognize that they can actually do the work that they want to do. Also, Carlos Beltran in Venezuela, he basically studied journalism, but he went back to Venezuela and he couldn't practice journalism because it's an authoritarian, repressive regime. You can't really be a journalist there safely. And so he moved into commercial work. And so he was doing commercial work, then the political crisis turned into an economic crisis, and the first thing that dries up in that time is the marketing budgets. So basically there was no commercial work available. And he had joined Storyhunter and started covering the political crisis in Venezuela, and he started covering it for NBC, New York Post, Univision, National Geographic, all these places. He became one of the most prolific freelancers on the platform. And now he got a job as a full-time staffer at NBC in New York City. And I was actually hanging out with him the other day, and I told him I was going to talk about him here. And he was like, no, this is not the story. Yeah, that's not the story. The story is that, yeah, sure, I got my career, and thank you, this has changed my life, but it's not just changed my life. When I was getting all those jobs in Venezuela, I was hiring out production assistants, I was hiring out editors, I was hiring out second cameras. I was working with so many different people that saved up enough money that they could buy airplane tickets to fly to Colombia or to Mexico. And they were inspired by the fact that they could actually work on Storyhunter and get jobs and work on other platforms, and that they actually could leverage technology to do the work that they want to do. And now they've won all these prestigious awards in documentary. You didn't know this, but this, if this didn't exist, they probably wouldn't have been able to do that. And there's just all these things that I never even thought about. And it's just really amazing how things change and how how you have to kind of adapt. And how the people who adapt quickly are the one and who know the work that they're doing and are really focused on being the best that they can be at whatever they're doing and put in their 10,000 hours are the ones who can find the path that fits them the best. A lot of times you find something that works and you go off to the side. I like this kind of photo. I don't even know what it is. But basically, if you have a purpose and you know where you're going and you stay disciplined and you really focus on what you're doing and you stay aware of what's happening and you adopt really quickly, you can do whatever you want. And right now, if you leverage the power of storytelling, you're going to be, this is the time. Thank you.
Keep going for Alex, everybody.